Hey, welcome to A Little Better. My name is Daniel. I'll be your host. This week on the podcast, I have two special guests. One is repeat, one is brand new. You'll have to keep watching to figure out who they are. We talk all about inviting, and we have a practical next step for you to grow in your knowledge and obedience of reaching across the line. You can take a brand new Equip class starting on March 13th. More information is in the show notes. Remember, our goal on this podcast is to know Jesus better by the power of his Spirit, do better, so together we can be a little better. Hey, welcome to the Little Better Podcast. My name's Daniel, and I'm here with two different faces or voices, depending on if you're watching or listening. I have with me Josh. Say hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, he's been on the podcast before. You may recognize his voice or face. And then I have a brand new, never been on the podcast before.
Never before.
Miss Paige. How are you doing, Paige?
Good.
Good. Both of you share a little bit about what you do here at Northridge. How long have you been on staff or attending Northridge in general?
Yeah, so I'm the Executive Outreach Director here at Northridge, been on staff since 2013, but I attended Northridge for 5 years before that, so I joined staff from being an attendee. So, and I get to do all, working with our global and local partners and outreach and thinking about how we can live, pray, invest, invite.
Makes sense that you talked about, inviting.
Right, it's really on point for the roles.
It's kind of your thing.
Yeah.
So I do like young adults with my husband Noah, and then I also do all of our access and inclusion and stuff for the deaf community. So I've been doing that on staff since August of last year, but came to Northridge in 2015. So I was, I don't know, is that 5-6 years? I don't even know.
Is Northridge where you and Noah met?
No,
actually,
no, we did not meet at Northridge. Somehow, some way, I was at the Rochester campus when he was in Greece, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that. And then I went to Henrietta with the launch, and then he moved to Webster. And so we just never met. Never met, and then met through mutual friends my senior year of college.
Yeah. Look at what, if you're a young adult out there not attending in there's a plug. Right?
There you go.
Yeah, and so, all right, guys. So we opened the sermon. You talked about a piece of your sermon at the end, what you love to talk about, things you love. So I felt no better way to open up a podcast than share one thing or two things, max of two, that you love to talk about. And Josh, for you, I'm going to tailor this question slightly different. You have to take one of the things that you did and expand a little bit on it. Okay. You shared with us about your sauces or your peppers, C.S. Lewis, your car. You got to pick one of them and open up a little bit. And Marvel Universe.
Yeah, that's the one I'm going to land on.
How much money you spend on Disney
The Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thankfully, I made the joke, just take all my money. Disney Plus is the same price every month, so it's not a massive dent in our budget.
Well, what I assumed was every time they release it and you can do the premium access. Do you guys take advantage of that?
Sometimes we do. Yeah, okay. we'll pay for the first show when it's available for a couple months while it's in theaters. Oh yeah, we've done that a few times.
I've not done that. Rena's like, let's watch that. I'm like, we will a couple months from
in 3 months when it's available. Yeah,
we can wait.
Yeah, for me, the Marvel movies, super nerd moment, but those movies have become a rumor machine. So anytime a new movie or a new show is coming out, right, they release some kind of trailer with all these little hints. And then the internet explodes with which characters are going to show up and what's going to be the major plot point. The Spider-Man movie in the fall is a great example of that. And so anytime we see one of those comment, I'm deep in that rumor mill until the movie goes. And Marvel movies, we do everything we can to see those ones in theaters. We're not big theater-going movie watchers, but we try to see those ones in the theaters when we can. So we'll pay for the Star Wars ones or other ones on Disney Plus, but I like to see the Marvel movies in theater. So
nice.
Stick around through the credits and everything.
Yeah, because they always have. They usually at least have something at the very end of the credits roll. All right, funny side story about Marvel. I enjoy it. I'm not deep in the rabbit hole, okay? But we've watched all the movies and everything. We were over at a friend's house. Their 4-year-old was we were battling together, and we were supposed to be Marvel characters, and he was Spider-Man, and he deemed me Thanos, okay?
Okay.
And I was like, I got you, bro.
Oh, no.
And he goes, wait, what? I'm like, you lose. You lose.
Had he seen it? Sometimes the kids do things and they've never seen the actual movies.
They don't
feel the weight of that.
And he deemed me the evil villain. I'm like, I win. You go away. So, but that's neither here nor there. All right, I'll answer mine and then I'll let Paige go. So, I think two things that I love talking about is books and coffee. Like, I'm always reading, and because of my barber, he got me hooked on this coffee subscription called Drink Trade, if you're out there. So you get like and I'm like super crazy in the sense of flavor notes and styles. I get something extremely different every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks I get like this wild bougie coffee, and my wife sometimes loves it, sometimes hates it. Sometimes she's like, just make the Folgers. And I'm like, you disgust me. And so I love talking about all the different kinds of coffee that I get, and books. I'm always reading a new book, a new author. And so those are the two things that I really enjoy talking about.
I always feel bad because I feel like for me, I buy expensive coffee because it supports a good cause, but I'm all about just, it's bitter bean water. I don't even care. Like, it's all the same to me. 7-Eleven, diner, and bougie coffee is all
What's
coffee.
really cool about Drink Trade is they're always like, they're like fair trade, like work environment.
Sure.
And, the coffee industry is kind of one of the top ranking, unfair work environments. And so, and they tell you how and who it was processed by a lot of times. That you get like this, piece of paper that tells you exactly what they did to get the coffee, of flavor notes and the temperature they were, everything. And it's like a ton of details. And I'm like, I'm really not sure what this means, but this is really cool. And I'm like reading it to Rena. She's like, do you know what that means? I'm like, no, but listen.
Sounds really nice.
Oh no.
And so she's neither here nor there.
That's kind of like Noah, because I got him, he really wanted a Chemex for Christmas.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like I'll get you a Chemex. Gave him a Chemex, obsessed with it, but makes like uber strong coffee, like made it for our community group the first time he got it. And he was like, guys, I got a Chemex, and like made it for everyone. And they were like, like way too strong. So then one of the people in the group was like, I'm going to come over and teach you how to make coffee in your new Chemex. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I figured out, like, I was not bougie about coffee until I moved to Rochester, and then I slowly, it was a quick transition, but it was fast, and like the people were like, you got to get a scale, you got to get whole bean, you got to get a grinder. Then I'm like, man, my coffee game went from a Keurig to like, now we have like coffee material.
So much work.
Takes up the whole counter.
Yes. Rena's like, can you make coffee? I'm like, yes, give me 1 hour. It's like, but yeah. All right, Paige, what's something that you love talking about?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of my job, but it's my job because I'm passionate about it. It's just like the deaf community in general. So when I was in 7th grade, I kind of took this small like ASL class at a hearing impaired center and just like fell in love with it because there was a deaf person who came as a guest speaker for us. And she was talking about how there's like not enough interpreters and all that kind of thing. And my dad was a police officer growing up. So I was like, that's not right. I'm going to change the world. Like I will provide access. So, but it's been this journey of just like, wow, I'm so passionate about it. Like I am an introvert and usually I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'll listen to you. But if it comes up, I will talk your ear off for at least 30 minutes. So
I love it. I love it. Yeah, so share just a brief, like a few stats about the deaf community in our area that some people may not be aware of.
Totally, yeah. So the current estimation is that there's 90,000 in the Rochester area. So if you remember, this was a while back, but we had prayed for like the 755 of Rochester, 755,000 people in Rochester who don't know. So 90,000 of them are deaf and hard of hearing people, and less than 2% of them have ever been exposed to the gospel. That's not even just like, I heard it and don't care. It's like, I've never even heard it. So it's a pretty crazy statistic, but, and a lot of that is just language barrier, like lack of access. And it's a lot of work to reach people that are different from us. So
for sure. All right. We're going to dive into that topic a little bit more in this conversation, but you gave us a sermon this past Sunday, Josh. Can you give us the brief 60-second recap of that?
Yes.
no pressure.
No
I got a timer right here.
Yeah,
so.
okay. Okay. So, yeah, really the idea was we need to be making time and space for people who are not like us. It's a perfect segue from talking about the deaf and hard of hearing community. But I reminded us of Matthew 28, the Great Commission, and of Acts 1:8, our challenge to be witnesses to what God has done in history and in our lives, and then walked through 4 areas where I think we can stretch to save a seat for other people. So that's saving a seat seat at our table, like in our physical lives, saving a seat in the conversation, listening to the people that we're trying to reach and really understand where they're coming from, save a seat in our hearts. Do we love the people that we're trying to reach? And then save a seat in our church or in our community. What will it take to welcome people who are not like us into what God is doing at church and in our lives, more deeply? And then went from there to help us think about, hey, like we talked about here in this icebreaker, when we love something, we talk about it. And so what easier way to share our faith than to stop thinking about it as a formula or all these things I have to know to share, but instead say, this is something that's changed me and something I love, and I want to share that and see it change someone else. And then thinking about all the habits of change as tools to equip us to invite others to the change that comes from knowing Jesus, right?
Absolutely. That's good. So let's talk about what are some of the barriers. You gave a great, like really inspiring sermon on Sunday of like, I want to go do this, in all these avenues of like, how can we do this, this, and this? But when it gets to the practical side, what are some of the barriers, and both of you jump in, either one of you, that keep people from sharing their faith?
Yeah, I think the most common one that I think a lot of people resonate with is just a lack of contact or proximity. I literally don't make time for people who aren't like me. It's just easiest to be in relationship with people that totally agree with me. You find those immediate connects with people so quickly. So how do we just make time in our lives? We're too busy with good things, but how do we make time for the best things, which includes the Great Commission, right? And so what would it look like to rearrange our schedules a little bit, create some time in our schedules to spend time with our neighbors, to meet our classmates, to I'd rather sit at home and do this or rather be around these people, but maybe I need to just stretch and go spend time in spaces that I'm not used to spending time in. So I think busyness and proximity are the main thing a lot of people face, especially coming out of seasons of isolation like the one we've been in, right? So
yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, do you think that in light of it, for some people, it could be business, but for others, it could be just shifting a focus inside of the things they're already doing? Because I think some people could hear sermons like busyness that I gave, or about like, oh, you're spending way too much time at the soccer complex or whatever the case may be, but instead of thinking, oh, I need to get out of that context in order to rest or in order to share my faith, of saying like, no, like as you go to those places, I think you're one of the best people that does these things of like every opportunity is an opportunity. Every slot in my calendar is an opportunity to share my faith, of having that lens, and especially thinking about the 755,000, the chances are there's at least one, if not, there's probably only one Christian there with you, but like to share your faith inside of that. And how does one approach it like that without being like the weird, obnoxious Christian that just like presents the Roman road, bookmark?
Yeah, I would say that we all have things, we talked about it again and again, even here, we have things we're passionate about. We don't have to find the Christian versions of those, right? Like if I care about Marvel movies, I don't have to find some Christian Marvel movie watching group to participate in. Bring that passion or bring that excitement out. If you're into coffee, find coffee groups where you can share the love of coffee. That's not a good or bad thing. It's neutral. God made coffee. It's a good thing. Like it exists and it's something to be enjoyed. So what's wrong with going out and enjoying something good in the community with other people who love it, even if they don't share our faith? So finding that common ground and chasing those passions with other people is a great starting place. And then over time, you become a normal person. You're a person that enjoys coffee. You didn't lead with, I'm this Christian, I've got an agenda for you. No, I led with, we both love coffee, and that's great. I can be your friend. I can enjoy your company over coffee or over Marvel movies or anything else, right? Start with the shared passion, and then hopefully as you build relationship, you get to know each other more deeply, and then it becomes natural to talk about your faith, right?
Well, why not just like street preach or sidewalk evangelize? Like, why not like, hey, I got something that you need to hear, track, bookmark. Why is that? Is that negative? Or should we never do that? Is there appropriate space for that? Like,
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think like part of that is like we're commanded to like love God, right? And then love other people. And I don't know that I know anyone that perceives that as love. Like who perceives like someone yelling at you on a street corner as loving? Like it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. So I think like that would be why I would say no to that. Maybe you totally could, like, with God, all things are possible. No, I don't know. But, like, I think I've never seen it done well. I've never seen someone preach. It kind of goes back to your point about leaving a seat in the conversation. Like, that's a very one-way directional towards someone, and not like, hey, I'd love to know, like, your experience, and, like, I'd love to know, like, what do you think? Because you're an intelligent human too. Like, I would love to know what you think. So I think, like, it has to be done, whatever approach you take, it has to be done with love and with kindness, like, first and foremost.
Absolutely. And I would add even that I think there are opportunities God puts in our life to engage in religious or spiritual conversations without relationship. But those are kind of providential moments God puts in front of us.
You stole my next question.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? We've probably, if you're a believer, or maybe this is just me, I'll start there. I've had those moments where it's like the tugging of the Holy Spirit saying, you need to say something to this person. And usually it's like a drive-by moment in the sense of, like, I have like 20 seconds probably, whether they're going to be they're going somewhere, or I'm in a line and I'm like talking to the barista, or like, and it's just like God's like, you need to say something. What does being faithful to the moving of the Holy Spirit in my life in that moment look like if I'm trying to still be kind but help them take or consider taking next steps in their spiritual walk?
Yeah, I mean, I've had moments like that hit me the most, like when I'm flying somewhere, like on an airplane, you're stuck with someone
like,
for
let's
3
go.
hours
I got
across
3
the
hours.
country. Yeah, so when those moments come up, kind of like what Paige was talking about, you need to hear what's really going on in that person's life. Even if it's just a couple minutes, you can find a relational connect. When you're street preaching, 9 times out of 10, in my experience with someone who's thinking street preaching is the way to go, they're thinking that the main thing someone is concerned about is their eternal destination. And sure, that might be the question some people are facing, but that might not be the most relevant thing in someone's mind. Maybe someone else, it's their struggle with anxiety or the stress they feel over parenting, or maybe they've had a recent loss of a loved one and they're not concerned about their own eternity. They're struggling with, where do I go from here, right? So when you address one question over and over again that nobody's asking, then you seem irrelevant. If only thing I care about is you and your eternal destination, but if that person doesn't care where they're headed, or that's not the main question, then you're not bringing the gospel to the things they're facing. So when you have those providential moments, especially where there's a tug in the Holy Spirit, usually that's because you're seeing something in that situation. You're seeing somebody's response to something, or you're seeing somebody facing something or running into something, and in a moment, you have a moment of compassion and empathy, and then you're bringing hope and encouragement, you're bringing a loving word, and you're lifting them up, but because you're watching or hearing something they're experiencing in that moment. It's that empathy that really says, I have the gospel, which is this life-changing message, and I see the thing in your life that the gospel does address, and let me bridge that for you for just a moment in whatever time I have. That's what I think it is. You seeing something, and that empathy drives us to say the gospel does speak to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would even add, like, the point of the Great Commission isn't go and make converts. It's like, because if that was the goal, then we would kick empathy to the curb. We would kick compassion to the curb of, like, the goal of me being a faithful, follower of Jesus, convert to Jesus, is I got to go tell as many people as possible, because my responsibility is just, I got to go share. I need to go walk out with tracts. I need, like, just street preach. I just need to get as many people to hear the message, and then whatever sticks, it's like throwing wet spaghetti against the wall. Yeah. Whatever sticks. Like, it's like,
it makes a mess.
The one string.
Yeah, it's just like, whatever sticks. But, like, the point of being a follower of Jesus is Jesus said, go and make disciples. And to quote, like, Dallas Willard, the biggest problem in a lot of America is we have a lot of undiscipled disciples who claim to be followers of Jesus, but they don't know what it actually means to be a follower of Jesus. And so is there, in a conversation, and either one of you can jump in, is there, like, a magic formula, or is there, like, okay, this is what needs to be shared to say, like, I actually shared my faith? This is addressing the question of, okay, what do I need to know in order to share my faith?
I think you need to know that, and I don't even fully grasp this, that I do not do the work of life change or, like, heart change, but it is God, which is why I think like when I first became a Christian, I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to share this with everyone, which is true. And I still feel that way. But at the same time, I like tried to like say it in the right way and like, okay, time it. Like, okay, I've been friends with them for 3 months now, maybe one more month and then they'll be ready. Like just like trying to like feel it out. But I think the reality is like, there's a reason why we say pray, invest, invite, and we start with prayer. Like, I think that prayer is like the heart of it. It's just like when we're praying, like God works through us. And like, oftentimes we don't realize how it's working, but you'll look back and see it, or sometimes you won't. And that's okay too. But I think the anxiety or the fear of like, oh, like, and I see it in the deaf community too of like, oh, they're different than me. I don't know what to say, like, or how to say it. It's just like, it comes back to like self-reliance where it's like, oh, I need to rely on me instead of being like, okay, like this person doesn't know God. Like, that's so sad. Like, wow, so much I've experienced from the gospel. I have to tell them.
Yeah.
But wow, God is the one who opened my eyes to that. I'm not going to open their eyes, but God calls me to love. So I will love, period. Like, I think that's kind of like where it starts. There's no magic formula that we hold. It's definitely like prayer is our tool towards seeing life change, I think.
That's so good.
Yeah, and I think of Paul's conversation with the people in Athens in the book of Acts, and one of the driving points of conversation there was he kind of challenged the crowd, hey, I see that you're very religious. You're groping in the dark is the language he uses. You're looking for something. You even have this altar to an unknown God. You're looking for something. Just in case we haven't figured out what we're looking for, here's an altar to an unknown God. I think people are looking for something. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for something in life. And you're trying to remind them or let them know that the painter is not in the painting. God is separate from everything we see. There is a God that made everything, and he's not in it. He's not a part of it. He's separate from it. And we can't do it. Like you said, it's not, we can't do it. There's nothing I can do. It's not about me. I think everyone kind of realizes there's no such thing as a perfect person. We all can admit that. And when we put language to it, I don't just make mistakes, but sometimes I sin. Like there's a stronger word than I just make mistakes. We recognize our sin. We realize God's outside the painting and offers a solution, and that solution was in Jesus. And then, hey, wouldn't it be really freeing to let go of all of that and just say, hey, God, I'm going to trust that what you did was enough. I think that's the basic message of the gospel. And when we invite people to that, it ought to be freeing. The yoke is easy, the burden is light. It ought to be surprisingly freeing for people who accept it. And it doesn't have to be a lot more complicated than, profess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus died and that he can be the leader of my life, and that's a good thing and an easy thing, surprisingly, right?
Yeah, two things that I want to jump in that conversation. One thing is, Paige, that you shared of like knowing that God is the one who does the life change in people's lives. I think that is one of the most beautiful yet twisted beliefs in theology, because it's like some people will take that of like, oh, well, God's the one that does it. I'm free. I'm good. I don't need to do anything. I'm going to take a back seat to this. But that's not the case at all. It's like we take a front seat in joining God wherever he's at work. And it's a privilege and the opportunity that God says, I want to use you in partnership with my spirit moving at work. And so, taking a front seat in prayer, taking a front seat in like being attuned to the Holy Spirit, like thinking about how attuned Jesus was all throughout the Gospels of like picking, heal this person, but I'm not doing this, not this person, because every time he's like, your faith has made you well. Like he was able to, being God in the flesh, sense like where people were trusting in him and not just wanting a quick fix, in that regard. And he could see that because he was God as he walked on this earth, but he was so attuned to God's presence that being God in the flesh that he was able to discern like, okay, this one, but not that one. And it's like, how am I supposed to know that? It's like the closer we are walking with God in prayer and doing these things, that's how we navigate. And then one resource, and I don't even want to present this resource as like, this is the method that you should use. But one thing that I've found super helpful, like the Romans road and those kind of things, it's like, let me give you 5 Bible verses and tell you why you're broken, and then you need these Bible verses. Not that at all, but I don't know if you've ever heard the Life Conversations. It's called 3 Circles is another slang, I think slang or shorthand that's used. And it literally has 3 circles. And this method is, I love it when you're versed in it, because when you sense the ache in someone, like where they're pointing out in this, it's 3 circles. It's God's plan, brokenness, gospel. So, and then from that, the 3 circles connect. From God's plan, we left God's plan, we sinned in our brokenness, and there's all these little squiggly lines off in your brokenness. And so it's like, in presenting, it's like, this is you in all your attempts to fix this problem, but they're all just leading you further and further away from God's original plan. But what God did is he provided good news. And the good news is this, that, and then that's where you share about Jesus, of how he's changed your life. And then what we do is we repent and believe. We turn from our brokenness and believe the gospel. And then from there, though, we recover and pursue God's plan. We start getting discipled and learn more. But you're living in this. We at one point we're living in our brokenness, but it just naturally flows in genuine conversation. And when you're in relationship with people and they're sharing about like their 9th, breakup, or whatever the case may be, like their money troubles again, or whatever the case may be, it's like, hey, can I share something? It's like, and then it's, as you're in life with people, it flows better. And obviously the best news is sharing the good news. And so tools are just tools. I think last year we did, when our campus pastors shared the Pi Squared series, I think Nate Miller, he preached a good message like, oh, here's the bridge. Here's
right.
Mankind and people have all through the centuries tried to be like, oh, here's a method. Yeah, they're all just methods trying to lead us to the ultimate, plan, which is, belief and repentance, in Jesus, in the gospel, while the Holy Spirit is moving and at work in our lives and hearts. And so,
well, the message never changes.
Yeah.
Those tools really are just
they're tools.
Points of clarity. Where can I meet my culture today and say, here's a way to understand what we know to be the best news, right?
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, in this last half of the show, or whatever you want to call this episode, I want to talk about the people on the other side. The people. So we talked about some barriers that we have, and there are some easy ways at Northridge that if you feel like information or content is what you're lacking, is this podcast, Sunday morning sermons, your community group. We have Starting Point as a great resource, Equip classes. And a part of all these things, there's usually recommendations of like further study and books that you could pick up that by trusted authors. There's the Equip email every week. Like there are so many avenues of resourcing. Like if you're thinking content or knowledge is your barrier, we would probably say that for most people, it's not. It's like your obedience and just being in a relationship with people, and then share your own personal experience. I remember I took apologetics class, and the opening question on the first quiz is, how many people in the world is apologetics necessary for? And there's like all these percentages, like to come to faith, like how many was apologetics? And it was like 90%, 50%, 30%, like 17%. And I was like 90, and it was wrong. It was 17%. Like I remember it was like most people in the world, like less than 20% actually need, apologetics or like defense of the faith, of it being plausible, thought-wise, to actually come to faith. It's seeing someone being changed or their personal experience of the gospel that, catalyzes them. And it's not saying that apologetics isn't good on the back end, but having it on the front end most of the time isn't even necessary, but it's still good. It's still good, inside of that. So let's talk about the people that are different from us. Why is this a barrier?
Why is apologetics a barrier?
No, why are people the barrier?
Okay.
Why are the very thing that actually is the end of the means, the barrier most of the time? Most of the time the barrier isn't even, okay, I can get busyness, I can make space in my calendar. Now it's like actually filling that seat when there's people everywhere. But in fact, I would say this is the largest barrier, is actually the people that you're wanting to fill the seat with. You can do these methods, you can be so well versed, but then you can still not successfully or, actively go and share your faith because you're afraid of the people. Why are they the barrier, and how can we overcome that, or what some steps we can take?
I think it's uncomfortable. And even though Jesus explicitly says that in this world, you will not be comfortable, you'll have trouble, we still expect to be comfortable, I think, at the same time. So even with the deaf community, right, that's my passion. A lot of people struggle. They just feel I saw this with my sisters growing up all the time. I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's a deaf person. Run over to them and be like, hi, like using my sign language. And they would be like, like I'm so uncomfortable, like dying, and like totally forgot everything that they knew when they were asked, like, how are you? They're like, I don't know. But I think the reality of that is just like, it's uncomfortable. And I think it will always be uncomfortable. And if we wait for it to stop being uncomfortable, it'll never happen. So I think that's a huge part of it, is just the comfort. And then also, people that are different from you will challenge you. They absolutely will. You will think differently after you hang out with them and after you talk to them. And that can be scary, because when we're left to ourselves with people that are the same as us, it's an echo chamber. And it's like, yes, I'm being affirmed all the time. Yes, this is truth. This is right. And then when you meet someone that's different than you, it's kind of like, wait a second, I haven't really thought about that before. That's a little uncomfortable. I thought I had thought through everything. And I think that can be scary, because people can be afraid of, well, what if they ask me this about my faith and I don't know the answer? Or what if they ask me this and then it starts me down like a rabbit hole of like, do I really believe this? And so I think these can be pieces that are just scary. I think the reality is that we're fearful and we want people to like us and we want to get along and like sing Kumbaya, but we're all different and we have that broken circle that influences everything, and so it can just be really unsettling for people. But pressing into, like, Jesus clearly sat with people that were different from him and was fine and came out the other side for us and lived a perfect life. And like, with God, like, we can do, be able to sit through that and not feel like, oh my gosh, this is ruining me. Like, no, like, we are called to be light. And so I think that's like two pieces of the uncomfortability of it, and then the challenge that comes from people that are different from us, and how do you kind of just like, go for it.
Yeah. So Paige, give us 2 or 3 tips if we're trying to engage. Like our deaf and hard of hearing community are really growing here at Northridge, like in our building, which is amazing. But say we're out in public and we want to, or even at church, and we're trying to engage someone and we don't know, the language of American Sign Language, like, what do we do? Like, do we just be like, well, I can't engage that person because I can't communicate with them. Like, what are some easy...
Right. I think one thing to think about is language isn't just language. Language is body language, too. Like, it's smiling and waving is the common currency of the world. And I think that we do that in the grocery store. Like, you accidentally, like you almost hit someone with your cart and you're like, oh, like you smile and wave and it's fine. And I think we just forget that.
Do people smile and wave? I don't know if I've...
Yeah, they do.
Head down, power through.
Head down, power through.
Yeah, so I think like they're normal people, just like us. Like there's diversity within the deaf community. There's diversity in like hearing communities. Like there will always be people that are different. But I think if we just go back to the one thing Jesus asked for us, right? Love God, love other people. Loving people is as simple as smiling and waving, or like you've seen them before and they know that you've seen each other before. You give them a high five, or like you give them a hug, whatever it is. Like body language communicates so much to people just in how you present yourself to them. And that's huge. And I think if you're like, that's great, but I would love to like know your name. Like I would love to know something more. Like whip out your phone, just like type like, hey, like I'd love to know your name, and show it to them. And they'll be like, oh, and then they'll like type back on their phone, or grab a piece of paper and write it back and forth, or, whatever. They still know English. They function in our world. And I think we forget that like, I'm so uncomfortable. Like they are uncomfortable every day of their life, and they are constantly reaching across to people like us, constantly reaching across. And so one small gesture of just like, hey, I'd love to try, but I don't really know, does wonders for them. Because it's like, okay, they recognize that, like, there is a barrier here, and I'm not just, like, always fighting to reach across.
How encouraging is it, in a hearing-first kind of world, for if they're bridging the gap all the time just to engage, how much of a difference does it make for us to take baby steps, to pull out my phone and a notepad app and make a message? There's a connect there that otherwise wouldn't have happened, right? I would imagine that's encouraging to have a bridge bridge built right there in the middle of the world, right? So
it's even the small thing of like, we feel great when someone acknowledges something that we've done or something that we've worked really hard on. Like, you worked really hard and set up this event, right? And then someone comes over and is like, oh my gosh, I love the tablecloth. And you're like, oh, it was worth it. Like, it's kind of the same way of like, I'm reaching, and no one is recognizing that I'm here. Like, no one acknowledges that I'm here. And then if someone is just like, hey, I see that you're here, it's like, oh, it was worth it. Like, it's worth trying. And so I think we just as Christians need to be more aware as far as like, who are the people around us that are trying to bridge a gap? Like, they acknowledge there's a gap too. It's not like, oh no, there's no gap, come over here. Like, they know there's a gap. And so how can we be the one who's constantly reaching? Because that's what Jesus did. Like, he reaches for us. So we should be reaching for other people.
That's good.
Yeah, I what this brings up to me, and to answer the question from earlier about the barriers with people, I think the common thing I keep hearing is language. It could be literally language. I don't know ASL or I don't know Spanish or whatever language is a barrier, but also just the language of our culture, the language of our circles. If you spend all of your time isolated in Christian bubbles, you have a way of talking about the world that is just alien to people.
Yes.
So, you know, even something as silly as, you know, my jokes about Star Wars or Marvel Universe or whatever, these little things where we engage in beautiful things that culture makes without making everything about culture evil. There are beautiful things where people are still made in the image of God and they still create good and fun things that we enjoy. When we take a little bit of time to engage in the language of our culture, to know what people are talking about, if you run into someone and you're connecting with someone, to be able to speak a shared language with them, to understand maybe mental health struggles or addiction struggles or loneliness, or to be able to talk about parenting or to talk about marriage in terms that aren't just Christian bubble terms, you know, that empathy of being able to meet them where they are instead of always saying, I've got something you need and you need to come over here and hear it my way, right? It's kind of a lost art sometimes for Christians to spend time understanding what other people are really saying. And when we speak the language that other people are speaking, whether it's ASL literally or, you know, just what people are facing, I think that makes all the difference in that relationship. It makes it less uncomfortable because we have that common ground, right?
Yeah, that's good. So to end the episode, I would love for each of you to give one or two just practical things of how can we reach? What are one or two practical, like, getting us out of our bubble on a regular basis? If we said, hey, I want to do this one thing every day or every week, that would move us in the way of Jesus, to take a next step, to be the ones that are pursuing those relationships that maybe look like us, sound like different, or don't look like us, don't sound like us, don't act like us. How can we be the reachers, if you want to say that?
Yeah. I think the two things I would say would be, first, pray. Like, I already said it, and it sounds simple and it sounds cliche, but it's like the reality of it. God changes our hearts to be more compassionate towards people that are different from us and to open our eyes to the people that are like right there that we have just overlooked because of, for whatever reason, we're focused on other things. So I think if you're committing to a daily habit, a practice of prayer, as far as, even if it's start with one person that you're aware of, and then pray, God, like, I'm aware of this person, like, provide opportunities for me to, like, use me in their life, but then also, God, help me be aware of people around me that are different than me that I'm just not seeing. I think that would be where I would start. And then second, shameless plug, you should come to my class. I'm teaching an Equip class starting March 13th. It's a 3-week course that's called Loving Your Deaf Neighbor, but essentially we'll be unpacking and really dialoguing about what does it look like to love people that are different from us. And just like, no question is off the table. Like, let's just talk through all of the fears, the things you're afraid to say, the things you're afraid to ask, like the things that you're like, I just don't know about this, or I just can't get past this. Like, let's talk about it. And then we'll give you like practical things, like how do you engage with people that are different than you?
That's awesome. That's Josh.
I would say find some piece of culture or something you love and find a way to engage with that outside of your Christian circle. Like, I keep coming back to that idea. We've all got things we love. We're not all spending 24/7 reading and meditating like monks in the corner, right?
You don't think so?
Daniel excluded. Everyone else is not doing that.
I'm definitely not.
You have things you enjoy. Find a way to connect with other people over that. So simple examples are things like, if you're a parent, if your kid has a sporting event or an activity, meeting other parents is the easiest.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be hard to say hi, but once you get past that barrier,
Start
that's
with smile
the
and
easiest.
wave.
Yeah, smile
and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Commiserate over the terrible refs in the game and how they made a bad call, whatever it is, but start to build connections in spaces over things you love or are a part of already. And I think instead of going to an event and looking for the other person that attends Northridge and only hang out with them, connect with the other people. Or if you've got a hobby, an activity, an interest, there's stuff happening all the time. Look out there and find groups that are connected to the things you're passionate about and start to build those invest relationships. Don't get to invite yet. Don't stress over exactly what you have to say to invite. Build a relationship where invite becomes supernatural because you're connected.
Yeah, so. I love that. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of A Little Better. We can't wait to hang out with you again next week. Remember the action step of Paige giving us that you can take Love Your Deaf Neighbor. Is that right? Did I say that correctly? Starting March 13th, 3-week equip class. You can find out more details on that in the show notes. Until next time, we'll see you then.